Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lindsay of Lindsay's Bookish Things, and today, since this is my second video, I decided that we will do everything I read in the past year and the ratings that I gave it. I figure this is a good way for you to see kind of what books I like and don't like, and we'll go from there. I'll do a little more detail on the books I read in November, but to be honest, I didn't read that many, but we will do a little bit more in-depth review of the books I read in November. So I guess this is sort of also a what I read in November. So before we start going through the books, I just wanted to, talk to you about what I consider my rating system so that you guys have a better idea of when I give these stars out, what they mean to me. So starting at the lowest, 1 star, hated it. 2 star, it was okay, is where I would put that. Number 3, for a 3-star book, I would put that as a book that I really liked, but there were things about it that just couldn't push it further than a 3 for me. And then 4-star is a book that I really, really love, but for some reason it just doesn't capture my whole heart. And then a 5-star is just, everything about it is perfect to me. Even if the book itself isn't perfect, the way that it makes me feel, the way that it created atmosphere, the characters, all of it, that's what I would give a 5-star. Okay, so the first book that I read in 2023 was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I love this book, 5 stars. The next book that I finished in 2023 was an audiobook, and that was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. Probably an unpopular opinion, but I only gave it 3 stars. The next book that I finished was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first book in a trilogy. It was dark, it was funny. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I finished was a audiobook, and it was The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I thought it was really good, but definitely a YA book, and so I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I finished was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. This is the Mortal Instruments #1. Again, another unpopular opinion, I hated this book. I gave it 1 star. The next book that I finished this year was The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was pretty good. Will I continue the series? Probably not. The next book that I read was Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. This one was hot, very steamy, and trigger warning for things like, public sex and voyeurism, things like that. But still loved it, gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read was Jade City by Fonda Lee. I thought it was good. I guess I didn't really like it as much as everyone else seems to. So I don't think I'm going to continue the series. I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I listened to this year was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I gave this book 5 stars. I think everyone should read it to really grasp a better idea of rape culture and blaming the victim. So I thought it was really good. The next book that I read this year was Malice by John Gwynne. This is the first book in a series. I loved this book, and I read the second one you'll see in a few minutes, but I definitely want to finish this series. I really got wrapped up in this world, and I gave this 4 stars. The next book that I listened to this year was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. It was okay, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. Again, I thought this was an okay romance. It kind of felt like it was a little drawn out, and I didn't really like that, so I gave this 3 stars. All right, guys, I warned you that it was coming. Book number 2, Valor by John Gwynne. I love this one even more than the first. There was a lot more action, and so I gave this one 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I unfortunately, I think being in the medical field made this book a disadvantage to me, because I gave it 3 stars because I guessed very early on what was happening. The next book that I listened to was Between Two Kingdoms by Suleika Jaouad. This book meant everything to me, especially based on my career, and I gave it a resounding 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I really enjoyed my time with this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I plan to pick up the next one at some point. The next book that I finished was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I love this book. I had so much fun reading it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was a reread for me. I just needed a little bit of a palate cleanser, and so I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. 5 out of 5 stars, a lot of fun. The next book that I finished was The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I enjoyed this book. It wasn't my favorite, 3 stars. The next book that I listened to was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This was my second Grady Hendrix book. I did not like the first one. This one I loved. Had so much fun. 5 stars. The next book that I finished was Heavenly Bodies by Imani Eriu. This is the first book in a duology. I, again, had so much fun with this. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars. All right, guys, and then the next book that I decided to read was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. As I said in my first video, I really adored this book. I loved the whimsy of it, the whole world, and I cannot wait to read more by her. And in fact, I have Caraval and the whole series coming up on my TBR, so I'm very excited about that. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, so those were all of the books I read up until November. In November, I ended up finishing 3 books, so I'll go into a little bit more detail about them. The first book that I finished was Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cusimano. This book was fine. I listened to it as an audiobook, and it was silly, it was funny. I think it got better as it progressed, and it did keep me guessing. It kind of took me in different ways than where it ended up, but still, I'm not going to continue in the series. This was the last one for me, and so I gave this one 3 stars. The next book that I finished was Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. I really love this book. So Ordinary Monsters, if you don't know, is about a kind of like a school for magical children. Now, it doesn't take place totally at that school. I've heard a lot of people classify it as dark academia, and I could see why. I really love this book. I loved the author's writing and the detail that he put into his characters. Now, this book is not a plot-driven book, so I tend to really like books where nothing really happens. So, like, there really isn't much to the plot where you're kind of progressing through these scenes and going through the motions. That's not really this book. It's very character driven, and I tend to like that. It reminded me a lot of The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, where it's really a book about nothing, but it's just so beautiful to read that you end up really loving it. I do wish this book was a little bit shorter. It was a little bit drawn out. I don't know what the author could have cut out to make it shorter, but it did take me a long time to read, which is part of why I didn't read very much in November, but I ended up giving this a 4 stars. Okay, and the last book that I finished in November was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the fact that it was a book about books, and the whole plot line of it fitting into all of these tropes, and the main character in the book feeling like she was part of this novel, and her sister playing this out. I really loved that. I loved that it was not only about the romance, it was about the sister relationship and what was going on with them. I loved the whole will they, won't they of the two main characters. And I loved that it was a little bit slower burn, drawn out, where they kept coming together and then going apart and coming together as they each learn about each other. And so I really, really love this book. It's definitely my top contender so far for best book of the year. I listened to it on audiobook. I am going to buy a physical copy to have on my shelf because I loved it so much. All right, guys, thanks for joining me for my second video. I hope that this list gave you a better idea of the types of books that I read. Now, this year was a better reading year for me. I still have a couple of more books that I have already finished in December because I'm filming this on December 7th. And I hope to get through a bunch more before I wrap up. But I hope you liked it, and welcome to my channel again, and I'll see you soon.